The African continent is incredibly rich in natural resources. It has 12% of natural gas and oil reserves of the world, yet untapped and largely exploited hydroelectrical power. It is home to vast gold, platinum, uranium, cobalt, and diamond reserves. Currently, only 10% of Africa's arable land is being cultivated, yet it holds around 60% of the world's cultivatable land. Africa also has the advantage of a large and relatively cheap labor force, mostly youth between the age of 20 and 30. Yet the African continent continues to grapple with the challenges of huge infrastructure deficits and lack of basic amenities. Complicating this further is the rise of insurgents due to proliferation of arms into the hands of non-state actors, making Africa high-risk location for investment. How can governments, entrepreneurs and investors navigate the troubled waters? This will be the issue in focus today. I am Ayuba Ilya. Thank you for joining. Thanks for staying. Now, my guest on the program today is the CEO of Emerging Business Intelligence and Innovation Group, Ajao Ajay. And she'll be talking to us about how best Africa can attract investment into the continent. Thank you for joining us on Issues Today.
Thank you very much.
Is going on at this moment, isn't it? Especially if you look at the issues of insecurity almost all over the continent. It's been from one coup to the other. It's either one protest against, government or the other, and so on. And then it becomes very, very, risky for investors to find Africa attractive. What are the opportunities therein, despite all of this?
So thank you so much for having me this afternoon. I think there are opportunities on the continent, and investors do actually find Africa attractive. There's a lot of excitement about Africa, especially with the launch of the African Continental Free Trade Area. The problem is we just need to make them more comfortable in terms of how to manage the risk. It's a continent with vast opportunities, but when we look at the infrastructure there is not the same as we have in the Western world. And so a lot of the times, these investors, especially from the foreign investors, have to comply with regulatory obligations from their countries. And of course, those regulations have been put in place, taking into consideration the infrastructure in place. Now, when they're coming to Africa to invest, it's very different. The regulations are very different from one country in Africa to the other. And of course, when it comes to enforcement, that's not, again, it's not the same. A lot of these regulations are not exactly enforced compared to this part of the world. So I think it's how can we then make these investors more comfortable in coming to Africa? Because at the moment, when you look at the whole world, there's chaos everywhere. And I think investors are looking for somewhere that they can put their money. And I believe that Africa has the right, the youth, the young population, they've got incredible resources. And of course, with the African Continental Free Trade Area, there's a lot of great opportunities there.
All right. Now, when you talk about regulations, I mean, there are policies that guides all the different countries on the continent. Some of them not so friendly when it comes to businesses and all of that. Do you think that there's a need to loosen up some of those things, and at what expense if that needs to be done?
So I from the work that we do here, we work with a lot of investors. I wouldn't say it's the policies. I think the issue is the applicability of those policies. So on paper, we have brilliant policies, but in reality, it's something as simple as if an investor comes to, let's say, Ghana or Nigeria, and they want to have a meeting with the right department or a minister, how easily accessible is that for them? Sometimes it could take them weeks. And when they do have a meeting, it could also be a case where it could take a long time. The process needs to be, I would say, looked into a little bit more. We also have, when it comes to the policies, different countries in Africa have different policies, and they're not very much aligned as compared to the EU, for example. We have the European Union that comes up with regulations where all member states have to kind of comply with. And of course, that's very different when we look at Africa. But I believe this is being resolved with the African Continental Free Trade Area. One of the things that they're looking at is standardization of a lot of these policies across the continent to make it easier for an investor to be able to pursue the investment opportunities on the continent.
All right. Well, now there's need for balance, isn't it? Even as much as Africa needs some of these investments to come from outside Africa, local, organizations, manufacturers, businesses needs to be protected as well. So how do we, draw up the balance here?
You're absolutely right, because if the right controls and regulatory frameworks are not in place, then of course we will attract investors, corrupt investors, to the continent. We have examples here, even in the UK, where there are certain banks, when they have weak controls and one criminal is able to get away with it, they tell all the other criminals and they all go straight to that very bank and take advantage of the systems, the weak systems. So yes, we do need to have a stronger controls framework in place, and of course, protect the businesses on the continent so that when they do attract investment into the continent, those businesses are not taking advantage of. But there are several things that can be done. So sitting in this part of the world, in the UK, it's very difficult when you're conducting a due diligence on a company in Africa compared to here. I'll give you an example. In the UK, we have the Companies House, where if you want to understand a company, who are the owners, when it was launched, all those information can be found very easily on the Companies House. But of course, if I go to another country in Africa, not all the countries in Africa have an online platform where you can actually access this information easily. So it makes it very difficult for a company or an investor in this part of the world to conduct sufficient due diligence from credible sources and to make the right judgment in terms of where to go. And because of that, when they do put their money into businesses, of course, when they don't have all the right information, then to them, that is high risk. And high risk means high return. So they will charge a lot more interest on an investment that they make on the continent because of the high risk perception.
Now, also, there's this problem of lack of data, which is, I believe, a major impediment when it comes to, like you highlighted there. How best can technology be taken advantage of to be able to, gather, that's for Africa now, to gather as much data for the benefit of investors?
So thank you for that. I think technology would definitely play a very key role. And we've seen the likes of the Mansa platform from the Afreximbank. They've launched a platform called Mansa, which I know they're working very collaboratively with the AfCFTA. And I think that's one step towards solving the problem. And that platform allows any organization that uses transact within the AfCFTA, they collect the data. And then, of course, that then becomes available for due diligence for foreign investors or anyone within the African continent who is trying to understand that very company that they want to trade with, who has traded within the AfCFTA, and of course, is on the Mansa platform. But technology plays a role in several ways. So yeah, the due diligence is one part. But also, I know that with the coronavirus since 2020 up until now, we've seen all these unicorns, the fintechs that have come out of African continent, even in the area of payment, making it very easy for funds to flow easily across the African continent from one country to the other. We've seen the Pan-African payment and settlement system. That's also an incredible opportunity there. In terms of our conference, we've got Microsoft, who is also supporting, and they will also be featuring and talking about the role that technology will play and also the strategic partnerships that is required for going forward for the continent to realize its opportunities.
All right, now we'll talk more about the summit that you are working on right now. But before then, I would like for us to look at the Russia-Ukraine crisis. And I mean, a lot of people have said, well, this offers an opportunity for Africa to grow big, especially in the oil and gas sector. Africa has about 12% of global oil and gas reserve. So how can Africa make the most of this moment, especially if you look at how Russia is a major supplier of oil and gas for Europe?
I think it's a real opportunity. Again, I'm going to go back to the AFCFTA. I think it's a real opportunity for the AFCFTA to work in terms of creating the right infrastructure within the transportation to help to transport these oil and gas from one country to the other. I also believe that the countries on the African continent who are already producing the oil and gas have a real opportunity there to export to a lot of these countries that have already sanctioned Russia and are currently lacking these resources. So it's a real opportunity there for the continent of Africa. It's not just the oil and gas, also within the food industry, it's a real opportunity for us to come up with innovative ways where we can make up for the lost imports that would have usually come into the continent as a result.
What sort of partnerships and deals should the African continent be looking out for between Africa and Europe, for instance, as regards agricultural? If you look at, the issues of wheat production and, even this oil and gas, what kind of collaboration should we be looking at now?
So thank you. I definitely, from our conversations here and from what we see in the market, there is a lot of, most of these European countries are looking for a solution, of course, to the lack of the wheat that they can't access, and of course, sunflower oil and a few other foodstuff. They're looking for where else, who are the countries that can produce this and that they can partner with. I think Africa has a real opportunity, and it may be a case of a technology where we can come up with a technology that can scan the continent and find out where are the lands where these can be grown, and can they then partner with certain countries in Europe to create the atmosphere for this wheat to grow on those in these countries on the African continent. I know in the UK, because of the Brexit, they announced last year and of course this year, beginning of this year at the Africa Summit, of the relationship that they are looking to build and develop with Africa, with African countries. So I definitely believe that there's a real opportunity there. We've also got quite a number of US clients that we work with who are very excited about the African continent. And I believe that this is a real opportunity to begin to explore different partnerships that can help the continent to survive any future, of course, issues such as this, and be able to also take a real to take advantage and step in the gap in the future as well.
All right, now you are hosting the African Investment Risk and Compliance Summit later, I think about 2 months now, in about 2 months' time. Tell us about what to expect, from that summit.
So thank you. The summit is very exciting. This is our third year hosting this summit, and the purpose of the summit is to shine a light on the opportunities, the limitless returns on African investment, and also the obstacles that have hindered the free flow of funds and investment opportunities in the continent. I'm excited because we've got people like the president of Sierra Leone who is attending. We've got the head of Oxford University. Again, she's speaking, Sherry Blair. We've got the group CEO of Zenith Bank, CEO of EcoBank, and several other very high-level people will be participating this year. We'll be looking at topics around what makes Africa attractive for global investment, how to identify the hidden opportunities on the continent, and then also topics around the environmental, social, and governance, which is a very big conversation right now as it relates to climate change. So we'll be focusing on how investment portfolios can actually utilize the African investment to improve their ESG framework. There will also be a look around the technology. So like we said earlier, what are the key technology, what role can technology play, as well as the strategic partnerships that are required. And then also, finally, we will focus around the diaspora. I think it's very important that we recognize that the diaspora is going to play a very big role in the transformation of Africa. And so then how can we then mobilize the diaspora? What are the opportunities there for them in order to help and participate in the transformation of the African continent? So it's happening in the UK. It's actually a hybrid event, and it's happening on the 5th of July in London. And people can also join us virtually. We also have in our presence the African Continental Free Trade Secretary General, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, will also be joining us in London for this event.
All right. Now, opportunities for participants now. What do they get to take away from that summit?
So participant, I would say networking opportunity is brilliant. There'll be a lot of investors there at the event, both the diaspora investors, those who are looking to explore investing on the continent from the diaspora will be there. So as little as private investors, venture capitals, private equities. So from individual investors to institutional investors at all sizes will be there. So I think the networking opportunity is brilliant, but also it's having some of these movers and shakers on the African continent, as well as the UK Minister for Africa and some political figures there, and really having this deliberation is really key. As a company, there's a lot to take away from there in terms of strategically, how do you then position yourself to ensure that you have considered the requirements of these investors. But also, I think it's important that the regulators are there who can also learn about the realities, the true picture of Africa, rather than what we've read in the news and all the negative perception. Because personally, I don't believe that issues around corruption, etc., has a color.
Well, I mean, these are realities, even though, on the African continent. So as someone that talks about risk, what should potential investors bear in mind, even as they, approach to invest on the continent? Finally.
So at the moment, thank you. So, I mean, at the moment, given the situation with Ukraine and we just come out of COVID, I would say that, I mean, the whole world is facing one form of challenge or the other. But at the moment, the risk currently on the African continent, I would say the rising inflation and the cost of living, and that's heightened by the war in Ukraine and also from the coronavirus and the recovery. We've also got exchange rate depreciation in most of these countries, rising interest rates. And of course, the oil and the gas, the petrol, the fuel prices going up. The knock-on effect is it goes on, it affects almost everything. So that is a risk, and it's not unique to Africa alone. It's a risk in most places, but of course, it's more heightened in Africa, given where the continent was prior to these instances. But I also believe that it's an opportunity for investors to then come in and see how they can solve the problem. I know a lot of investors are thinking of where they can put their money going forward, given that in Europe and US and all these countries, they have almost exhausted most of the opportunities as compared to Africa.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Would have to end the interview at this point. We appreciate you joining us on issues at this moment.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Yeah. That was the CEO of the Emerging Business Intelligence and Innovation Group, Adjao Adjei-Twum, talking to us about investment opportunities on the African continent. And that's that for the show at this moment. Connect with us via our social media platforms and subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch more. I am Ayuba Ilia. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.